This could be an interesting conversation, so let's start with this message. Hi, you mentioned recently that you're poor financially. Have you considered returning to pharma for a better financial situation? I'm curious as I have a very good paying job that I don't like, but I do like the financial security it provides. Well, some context first, so we're all on the same page. I worked in pharma. I left about 4 years ago. And yes, it was a financially secure position within the 40% tax bracket. But the reason why I joined pharma in the first place is not because of the financial element. That was through back then an ignorant desire to actually help. And the reason why I left is because I discovered they have very little in terms of intent to actually help, and it was more about maximizing profit. And my personal circumstances that in previous years where I was involved in criminal activities for over a decade, at 25, there'll be months where I make like 20,000 a month. So if I wanted to stay to make money, I would have done something else. But even during that period, the material things and that lifestyle was so unfulfilling that it resulted in severe depression and me trying to take my own life. So when I ended up in a similar circumstance in pharma, where yes, the financial security was desirable, uh, not feeling like I'm actually making a difference was slowly spiraling me into the same pit of depression that I almost lost my life in the past. So for me, it was a self-preservation move, although incredibly risky, and I wouldn't recommend to anyone to go from financial security to then not make any sort of money for a few years to really pursue purpose. But since I have a degree of trust in my capability to survive, because I've been a resourceful survivor for most of my life, for me it was a worthwhile risk because it was more of a decision between life and death. And to answer your question, although they say never, I'm 99% sure that I will never return to pharma. Despite of the financial struggles and instability in the last 4 years, the amount of fulfillment and happiness has been the biggest in my life, honestly. Since most of my happiness comes from my relationship and my fulfillment comes from the purpose I attribute to myself. And as someone who had the opportunity to enjoy financial and material things over the years, none of that has brought a fraction of happiness or fulfillment as my current life is. And this is also a long term project, right? Building wealth is about compounding, is ironically the third stage of the scientifically savage method, the 51% rule. Even if it's just 1% every day, if you keep growing, doing the same thing, it eventually can compound into something quite meaningful. And since this is a path that I can see myself sustaining for the rest of my life potentially, is something that I trust in myself to continue growing to the point where it can even be materially rewarding or more rewarding than having a soul killing corporate job. But that's just my take on it. I'm not advising anyone to go just leave their corporate jobs and pursue their passions. Actually, I don't believe that people should monetize their passion, they should monetize their talent. But that's a different conversation. And really looking at what is sustainable and what actually is fulfilling to most of us, besides a baseline of security that we all need, we need meaning. That meaning comes from purpose and from our relationship. So yes, in a world where everyone is isolated, we need more and more material things to try to fill that bottomless hole. But I found way more enjoyment and even a sense of security by investing into a community, into relationships, into creating value over extracting it. Hopefully, this answers your question. Protect your peace.